In this video, we're going to look at analyzing sensor data. And the first thing we need to do is we need to check that we have the data. So we need to open the navigator view, and then we can see our folder. And if I expand that, you can see my data. So we're good to go. And the next thing to do for this example is we need to open some files. The first one is the sample sensor tracks file, sen_tracks.rep. So double click on that to open it. If the import dialog appears, select over the ground for both tracks. But as you saw then, mine loaded straight away. And then we click on Fit to Window to make sure that we can see all the data. Now we need to add the sensor data. So drag sen_ssk sensor.dsf into the plot editor, then release, and then we just accept the default options by clicking on Finish. Now we need to add the sensor data for the frigate, so we want sen_frigate_sensor.dsf, and again drag and drop. And this time there is no dialog box, because when the data is imported, there won't be any visible change to the plot area, since there are very high volumes of sensor data are typically loaded, so it's hidden by default. So now what we'll need to do is we'll need to actually view the data. I'm going to close the navigator view, and then I'm going to open the outline view, and I actually prefer my outline view down here in the bottom left. So I'm going to drag it down there. And as we can see, we've got two tracks, track frigate, which is blue, and track new_SSK, which is red. So if I expand the track frigate first, then I can see we have sensors, we have 5 items. And then I'm just going to expand that, and then I can see the sensor data. Left click on the top one to select it. I hold down the Shift key, and then left click on the bottom item. I'm going to come up to the View toolbar, click on Reveal Selected Items, and there you can see in the plot editor my sensor data appears. Now I'm going to expand the red track new SSK, and I can see I have one block of sensor data. Click on that to select it, and then click on Reveal on the View toolbar. I could also have right-clicked on the sensor and then done Reveal Item that way. And next we're going to format the sensor data. Now I want to format these very first 5 lines where red encounters blue or detects blue. So what I need to do is I'm going to go into my outline view. I left click on the first item, and then I hold down the Shift key, and then I 5 left click on the bottom item. Now I'm going to right click, mouse over multiple items, select color, and then I'm going to select yellow. And there we can see what happens. And I'll click on Fit to Window. Could also change the color in the Properties view by clicking on the ellipsis button, where I can change it back to red. But I'm going to change it back to yellow, as I like that color. And now we're going to conduct a plot lock. And this simulates the process of dragging tracks so that their bearing fans match. In the UK, this process is called a plot lock. In the US, it's called a tie point. But whenever we want to do something like this with Debrief, we have to tell Debrief the relationship between the tracks. And we have the 2 tracks here, frigate and new_SSK. And we have to designate one of these as the primary track, the main track. And the others will be secondary tracks, and they're the ones of which we're trying to calculate or determine the relationship between these tracks. So I'm just going to close my sensor data, and then with my track frigate, I'm going to left click on it to select it, then on the View toolbar I'm going to click Make this primary. But before I do that, I'm just going to select the track tote. Now I'm going to make track frigate primary. And as you can see, that now appears in the track tote. I come down, select new SSK, right click, and then I select Make Secondary. Look what happens to the track tote as soon as I make my selection. And there we go. I have my track frigate and I have my track new SSK. And then we're going to commence plot lock. So what I need to do is I need to click on the Drag Whole Feature button on the main toolbar. And then I move my mouse down to the track. And by default, it's a brown mouse cursor. As soon as it turns green, that's over a hotspot. So that means I can start to drag. We're not seeing anything in the bearing residuals. That should have opened, but for some reason it hasn't. So I Windows Show View Bearing Residuals. And as you can see, my bearing residuals window opens. And if I click on the use ± 180 scale for absolute data, I can see the information about my plot. You have the key down the bottom. You can see the own track data. The own track course is here, and then the measured data, as you can see, is the blue circles. Now, ambiguous bearings are marked as triangles. The calculated bearing is the red circles. And what we have to do here is we have to position the tracks to minimize the difference between the measured bearing and the calculated bearing. So if I zoom in, you can actually see that the error is very, very minimal at where it is at the moment. If I zoom out again in the bearing residuals, if I drag the track away, now you can see what's happening. Now it's showing us that there's a huge error. For example, at the end of the track, remember we have the time scale here, so at 0418 using the time controller, this is at the end of the track. So we have an error of what looks to be around 80 or 90 degrees. I can zoom in that way. Yeah, it's about 88, 89 degrees. So I come back to my plot, and I'm just going to try and position these so I get as close to 0 as possible on my track. I just zoom out, and I'll start at the beginning, and I zoom in, and here's my error, and now I need to zoom in on my track. Now if I move Blue Frigate over USSK, and I zoom into my first data point, now I can see that I've got an error of about 0.075, 0.08 degrees. So now I need to zoom in as much as I can, and then I reselect, drag entire component. And I mean, this is pretty good, but let's see if I can just reduce that a little bit more. And I'm zoomed in, and I'm now down to 0.0025 of a degree, which I think you'll agree is a negligible error. And then I can fit to window, and I zoom out in the bearing residuals pane. At the end of the track, we have an error of just under 1.2 degrees. So I can pan across. Now I'm going to need to zoom in a huge amount here, and then I can drag the track now. See if I can get it below 1.2. Doesn't seem to be updating. And there we go, with a little bit of manipulation, I've got it down to -0.1. Need to zoom in a little bit more. And then it's just a case of getting it as tight as we can. And there we go, I've got -0.008, I would imagine. So that's pretty good. And then I click on Fit to Window. Now if I zoom back in, and I can look at the curve here, we can see that there is a slight discrepancy between the red track and the sensor data from blue. But I think you'll agree that the errors at the start and the errors at the end are pretty close. So we've done quite a good job there. And if you value some sensor data more than others, you can experiment with hiding other blocks of sensor data by making them invisible. And this helps to declutter the plot and the stack dots, making plot locking much easier. So for example, we'll come across to the outline view and we'll select one of the sensors, and then we'll click on Hide Selected Item. And then back in the bearing residuals, we'll just update and refresh, and maybe we don't want all of that hidden. So we can expand it, and then we can experiment, and we'll just shift click, and then we'll hide a selected portion. Now we maybe not want to remove all of them, And as you can see, we can add certain sensors back in, but this is just something that you can play with yourself and experiment with just to find out what you want to work with. So of course, if we wanted just the first and the last items in this particular block, and that's how you do it. Well done, you've completed the steps on loading, managing and formatting sensor data and supported at the end there by a healthy dose of plot locking. So having come this far, you now know the initial steps of using Debrief. And yes, you are a way off mastery, but that does come with a little bit of practice. So please be sure to run through the steps above again as and when you need to. And you now know about the views and how we can use them to our advantage, so it won't take you as long next time. And next we'll move on to the tutorial controlling what you view.